Okay, yeah, so that was the first. So since we share it, my favorite emoji is the poop emoji. I talk about it all the time now, but I haven't shared it in my bio. Those who know me personally, I did battle colon cancer, but I was very lucky because it was caught in my very first colonoscopy. So I'm 52 years old. I will say my age, like Brooke Shields says. I am proud of being 52 years old. And I caught it last January when I was 51, having my very first colonoscopy. So now I try to share with all women. I had no idea I was going to wake up with colon cancer. I was very lucky because that colonoscopy made me only stage 1. I never had to go through chemotherapy or anything else. And I want to share with all of you, do not wait. Get your tests. Make sure you take care of it. So yes, I felt comfortable, but it is the first time I've ever said that very publicly. So thank you for letting me be vulnerable. All right. So now we're going to have some fun because women's sports and sports is my passion and my heart. As Sam was sharing, you know, for us, we're really excited that we have this panel. And today we're going to dive into the entire women's sports ecosystem. And we're going to talk about the importance of boosting investment and why, how we want to grow the game for girls and women so they can play, compete, and lead. So I'm going to ask all of you, I don't care what level you played at, but raise your hand if you played any form of sports throughout your life. Yep.
Right.
See? Yeah. All right. So I'm going to tell you another stat. Did you realize that 94% of C-suite women played sports? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So there is a pattern, and it is not a coincidence that we're having this moment in time for the women's sports kind of industry. So we'll dive into that as well. But without further ado, you did hear who I was, and I'm very lucky that I get to run the foundation that the pioneer, social justice icon, amazing athlete, amazing human being, Billie Jean King founded 50 years ago. And she founded us to make sure that girls and women could play. And so we spend the majority of our time doing advocacy, research, and fighting to protect Title IX, and also making sure that we have community programs that make sure girls can play. So if you haven't heard about us, check us out. All right, without further ado, I want to introduce this amazing panel that we have. So first and foremost, so you get every sport on this panel, just so you know. It's pretty crazy. All right, 3-time WNBA champion and current player of the world champion Las Vegas Aces. Whose grit, power, and determination has helped her play the game of basketball at the elite level for over 10 years, but so much more than just basketball. We could talk about all day long because I spent a lot of time in that sport. Alysha Clark.
Thank you.
And yeah, I need my notes and I need my readers because I can't see anything anymore. 2-time Women's World Cup champion and former goalkeeper for the U.S. Women's National Soccer Team, who currently serves as a global creative advisor for many brands and happens to be one of our newest board of trustees of the Women's Sports Foundation, Ashlyn Harris. 5-time member of the U.S. Women's National Flag Football Team and current wide receiver for the Boston Renegades, and yes, that's tackle football, who founded Gridiron Queendom, a company dedicated to promoting and supporting women and girls around the world who play tackle and flag football, Adrienne Smith. And if you're paying attention to brands that are investing in women's sports and have been doing it, there's one brand that everybody's talking about, which happens to be Ally Financial. And we're lucky enough to have Ally Financial's Executive Director of Brand Marketing driving the strategic direction and execution of its sports and entertainment sponsorships, brand partnerships, and Web3 gaming initiatives at Ally, whose softball and competitive cheerleading, it is a sport, background serves as continued inspiration to help pave a path for progress for women's sports properties and athletes. Bridget Sponsky. Yeah, it's a pretty powerful panel, just so you know. You know how hard it is for these three to play at the level they play at? And I think for me, seeing brands like Ally investing equally and fighting to find more places of where they can invest in is so critical. So Bridget, I'm going to start with you. We have a shared knowledge that when girls and women play sports, it's really not a nice to have, it's a must have for girls. So Ally in particular has been a leading investor in women's sports, including your recent little announcement you just did with the Aces of the jersey sponsorship, which is pretty, just a little one, and so much more. I mean, I couldn't list everything that you've done. But I do want to hear your take on how Ally decided to be a disruptor in the sports sponsorship space, because most people don't realize the metrics that are done in sports and how men's sports are invested in has been our unfortunate formula for the women, and it's taken first movers to be able to be out there, and you have been one that have literally walked the talk. So can you talk us a little bit more about it?
Yeah, so I actually started at Ally to rebrand the company. Like, I came to Ally to actually create the brand. And that brand was created in a time of complete and utter economic recession. And so we knew that in order to be a brand that mattered, we didn't need to be another bank, we just needed to be a better bank. And so that disruption was just part of our ethos and what we were born from as a brand. So it's just, we tackle every single thing we do in a disruptive manner, which means deeds over words. It's why our name is Ally. It was very, very purposeful. We are an ally because banks' responsibility is to affect the positive financial trajectory of people's lives. And so I think that disruption carries over into sponsorships. So when you think about sponsorships, it was a no-brainer for us in terms of how we entered. And I think a lot of people think why a bank? Why is a bank investing in all of these sports properties? Well, if you think about it, the women consumer is one of the most powerful consumers in America today. They own 90% of the household financial decisions, and that's extremely important, I think, for all consumer brands, but it's extremely important for a brand like Ally. And when we started in women's sports, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It wasn't an easy process. We had to have a true element of bravery, I think, from the top down, and that was the CEO, our CFO. My boss, Andrea, is a badass, and she has championed a lot of this work. But going into the NWSL, much less in the middle of COVID, and then having, all of the turmoil that came within that league that, Ashlyn was a huge part of it. It was a point in time where everybody was leaving, the brands were leaving, and we said, this is not who Ally is. This is not how we do things. We're going to double down, and we're going to also invest not only in the NWSL, but the NWSL Players Association, and we're going to invest in their athletes. And that's why we have a killer right next to us here. And she has been absolutely instrumental in helping us to determine where do we need to be in women's sports? What do we need to pay attention to? And hearing the athletes' voices, I think, are extremely important. But as we kind of took the next leap in women's sports outside of just the sponsorship with the NWSL, the 50-50 pledge was really born from an insight that if anything was actually going to change, and if we were going to be able to make impact, the biggest driver of revenue in women's sports is media, and so that's where we focused. And we really took a hard look at our own spend in media. We were only spending 10% in women's sports media. When you looked at our total sports sponsorship, total sports media sponsorship, it was 10% in women's, 90% in men's, and content that we probably didn't even know where it was going in the sports world. And so that's really where it was born, and like I said, it was an element of bravery. It was an element of being aligned at our values from the top down, all the way throughout the enterprise, and getting that support. And so in May of 2022, we made a pledge that for the next 5 years, for every $1 that we spend in men's sports media, we'll spend $1 in women's sports media. And it's not easy. It's definitely not easy. That 5 years was very purposeful from a business perspective, because we knew that, one, we couldn't do it alone, and two, the inventory doesn't exist. So, for us as a brand, how are we going to invest in media when it's not getting any eyeballs, or it's being broadcast at 3 o'clock in the morning somewhere? And so we've had to be very intentional, and we've run into a lot of barriers and a lot of roadblocks, really around low-cost ad inventory, poor time slots, and really honestly, having say in where our dollars are going and where are we able to directly invest that into women's sports. And I think that's where that call to action really came into play with the legacy media companies. I think a lot of the emerging companies, we've talked about a lot of new and emerging platforms coming through from former women athletes that I think are extremely important to invest in. But coming to the table to move, for the first time, a women's professional sports championship to prime time, where it's never been in prime time. And the minute that happened, the viewership skyrocketed 71%. It was like mind-blowing. Imagine that.
Weird. They can find us. Wow.
I love playing at 11 a.m. in a championship game.
I know, right?
It's great.
Right? But I mean, even since the pledge, the NWSL in particular, they've seen a 140% increase in their fan base. The fans are spending more. Our recent partnership with the USGA, we're a big catalyst for the reason that there is the largest purse in the history of the U.S. Women's Open. And I mean, this is all really important things for the brand, because what we're seeing now in our brand metrics is that we've seen double-digit growth since our pledge, which is absolutely insane, and you cannot say that that is not a direct impact on those metrics. So double-digit growth and awareness and likability and preference, and when you see that type of favorability from non-customers, that means that we're able to convert them they're 6 times more likely to convert and at an 87% more efficient cost. So when you think about the landscape of sports fans, and you've got 160 million sports fans in the United States, and 84% of them, I think I saw, want to watch women's sports, that metric is extremely powerful.
Yeah.
So we're going to spend more time talking about investment, but the one thing I always like to say is we've had 50 years to build a product. You want to look at women's sports as a startup that has a 50-year kind of product development, and instead of a charity. And for so long, women's sports has been looked at as a charity, but you have a 50-year runway because of a really pretty piece of legislation that happened 52 years ago that allowed us to sit here in Title IX. But what I want you to hear from Ashlyn on is, I think Ashlyn is one of the best representatives of the whole ecosystem. And it's important for you to think about investing in women's sports from the youth level, high school level, college level, professional elite level. But at the end of the day, none of us care how far a girl plays in sport, because we know when girls play, they end up leading. I'm a 9th grade dropout, as Women's Sports Foundation calls me, because I quit playing softball in 9th grade for all the wrong reasons. We can share that later. But I want Ashlyn to take you on her journey, because it's an important one to understand how powerful this ecosystem is. And you're not just making a smart business investment, but you're actually changing the way women are perceived and society. You talk about all of us up here are incredibly competitive. We all want to win because we all grew up playing team sports, no matter what level you played at. So Ashlyn, take us on your journey, because you hit everything.
Great, yes. Where to start? I guess from the beginning. I was a young kid who loved to play sports, like most of us. And I came from a family who both of my parents worked 2 jobs. And sport became my chosen family. My parents were going through a really rough time, and they were going through a really dramatic divorce, and it was hard in the house. So sport became my home away from home. And I loved it from the beginning. It was everything and anything I could have imagined. I felt supported. I felt seen. I had space to be who I wanted to be. And I was really young and quite good at a very early age. I never really connected with school. I was always wanting to be outside. I wanted to play, and I think most school systems at the time didn't really know what to do with me, because I was a creative and I saw the world differently, is how I like to express it. But I had a standardized test in 5th grade, and they learned I couldn't read. So I went on this whole journey of hating school. I had to take a lot of learning disability classes, and it got to the point where a lot of my coaches sat down and said, if you want to make it in sports, you have to prioritize your academics, because that's what's going to take you to college. college was never a conversation in my family because no one had gone before. My mom dropped out at 16. My dad, I think, got his GED at some point, still doesn't really talk about it. So it just wasn't a priority in my family. And I started doing drugs at a really young age. And I didn't have a great support system, and that's just what I did. So at 13, I picked up the phone, and I knew I always wanted to go to the University of North Carolina. So I called Anson Dorrance, and I said, "So you're going to give me a full ride? My parents can't afford it." And he was like, "Who is this? How old are you? Call me back in 2 years." So at 15, I ended up playing in the Youth World Championship, sold out 60,000 people. It was a U19 championship, and I was playing when I was 15, the youngest in the tournament. So as a 4-time All-American, I was this crazy prodigy. I ended up getting a full academic scholarship, but it was hard for me to pass my SATs, and I was like, "What's that?" So I figured it out. Don't worry, I figured it out, and I got to college on a full academic ride and sports scholarship. Sorry, not academic. My first week of training, I blew out my knee. So that was humbling. And I really had to sit down and figure out what life was about to look like. So I really started diving into my academics. I came back a year later and I blew out my other knee. Yeah, real joy. So here I am, this prodigy 4-time All-American who thought I was already playing with the U.S. national team at the time. And I had to really reevaluate who I was, what I wanted to do. And academics became a really, really important piece for me because it was a challenge. And as an athlete, comfortability is the death of me. Like, I have to be challenged. And my last 2 years of college, I was on the dean's list. I graduated with a 3.5 GPA from, yes. And fast forward, I won 2 world championships. Sports, kind of just what I did, not who I was. I can honestly say without sports in my life, I would definitely not be sitting in this room on this stage. I would have been a statistic. So the importance of sports for people like myself, who it gave a ticket out, it gave me a second chance, it gave me an opportunity to fight like hell for young kids to be seen and to have a space where they can do what they love and not be a generation of not graduating from high school and being just a fuck up. So I am very lucky to say that sports absolutely saved my life.
And then she went on to help to get equal pay for soccer.
Oh yeah. That was were very small things.
A few
Small
other things
things.
happened after that. Thank you. All right, Alysha, 10 years playing in the W. You played for, I think, 3 different franchises, right? Seattle, Mystics, and now the Aces. Yeah. Basketball, I would say women's basketball in particular is having a moment right now. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, it's more than a moment, but we're finally, getting the exposure and the visibility that we've been talking about for so long.
It's one of those things that if you've been in any of these sports and you've watched every one of them on our different trajectories, women's basketball has had this talent for a long time, but hasn't been seen in the way that it should be seen. Mm-hmm. And one of the biggest things that just happened in the WNBA, something that just came out of your franchise, that you just announced that the entire season is sold out for the Aces.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah.
I want you to explain to this audience why that's so important. It ties a lot to what we talked about with Bridget, the metrics that we've been defined under, but the fact that women's sports is getting these metrics in a traditional form, but they're also doing other and new disruptive things. But what does this mean for the Aces? What does this mean for women's basketball? Why is this happening? Love to get your perspective on that because obviously you're close to it with being a member of that team.
Yeah, I promise you we're not here like on an Aces media pub plug, I promise. But we are. No, I mean, it's huge, right? This is the first time in WNBA history that all season tickets were sold out. And to think about how long this league has been around, for this to be the first time that happened is mind-blowing. But, for us, like in our franchise, in our organization, in our community, it didn't just come overnight. Like there were times when San Antonio, so for those that may not know, San Antonio Silver Stars were the original, before that, but were the original franchise that came to Vegas. And so there were years where like people weren't coming to the games. You know, when it comes to investing in women's sports, everyone loves to throw, well, where's the metrics to support it? And so it takes time. And so we got to a point where we were building in our community. I wasn't there, but they were building the community to where, you know, the product on the court was now matching what was in the seats. And so when you have a moment like this with our franchise and you have fearless leaders at the top, and I mean, honestly, it starts from Mark Davis down. Like his investment and his passion and intentionality behind investing in women, not even just the aces, but like in the Raiders organization, like you can look on leadership positions. It's not just the people working at the front. It's like people who hold power. And he sees that and he understands the importance of that. And so to be able to have him as our leader and then trickles down to Nikki Fargas and Natalie Williams and then our coaching staff, like when you look at our organization from top down, it's excellence and it's like disruptors from the top down. And so in women's sports, like with that, with all the numbers that we were talking about with NCAA women's like blowing the NCAA men's out of the water with viewership, these are the things we've been saying. We're like, the product is there, the interest is there, we just need to be seen. They can't invest in us and they can't see us if they can't see us. You know, and so when you have like that opportunity now, the visibility, it brings in partners who want to be a part of that, who see, you know, the investment value that is there and honestly like are putting their money where their mouth is. Everything is like a fad, you know, oh, we believe in diversity, oh, we believe in inclusion, oh, we believe in women's sports, well, show me. Yep. And that's what Ally has done. Mm-hmm. And that's something that for me personally wouldn't have happened if the visibility wasn't there. I went from being I was cut twice, being on a like 12th person on the roster, didn't play, played a little bit, worked my way into a starting role, was left wide open, to then being crucial parts of the 3 championship teams I've been a part of. And I didn't have a jersey for sale online or in our team store. That's right. And so, again, it just goes back to the full and total investment from our facilities to our merchandise. Like, I had one of my friends text me yesterday and was like, oh, your jersey was sold out, like that.
You!
Like that kind of stuff doesn't happen for players like me. You know, we're not the flashiest, we don't score the most points, you know, but we are an integral part of a team. And when you have people around that can see that, and that for me is what women's sports is. Like, yeah, it may not be flying high dunking and doing all this crazy stuff, but I guarantee you when people come and watch, they keep coming back. And so that for me has been the biggest change, and just being able to have a facility to call our own, the first in the WNBA to do that. Now other owners are having to step up, and it's like, you know, iron sharpens iron. So let's go.
Let's go. I love that.
Well said, well said. All right, now we're going to talk about the sport of football. So, I mean, I know Adrienne was on earlier talking about something else, but I think one thing you need to understand is there is another sport that is emerging, that is going to emerge fast and furious, and it is girls flag football. It will be an Olympic sport in LA 2028.
Yeah, that's amazing.
It is now a high school sport in many states. So whatever state you're in, fight for it, because it is going to be a fantastic sport for girls, and it's going to also help us grow more opportunities for girls to play sport at the youth level. So we are thrilled, but I think Adrienne and I were having a chat. We both know how fast this is going to grow and how important it is. So I want to get your perspective on what this means for your sport and what you think is going to take place with flag over the next 4 years.
It's going to be absolutely phenomenal. Like anything we've seen in terms of, oh, this is the next best and greatest thing, it holds no candles to football, to flag football. And I just want to say, you know, kind of what Ashlyn had mentioned before about playing in championships at like 11 a.m. It's the same thing. Like, I'll speak quickly on the tackle side. I play for the Boston Renegades, and our championships have been at 1 p.m., 2 p.m. on ESPN, and we get the same thing. Well, the metrics aren't there. We aren't seeing it. This will be the first time, I have to make this announcement, this will be the first time July 27th, that the WFA Women's Tackle Football Championship will be in prime time.
There we go.
ESPN.
Yeah,
And
that's amazing.
I bring that up because right here, like, I don't know, we just pick a sport. Let's go. I feel like this is the dream team. It could be bowling. It could be curling. Like, I'm ready. Like, the four of us, let's just pick a sport and we're gonna win. That's what Sponsky always says. We're gonna win. So, but it's because of what's been going on with the NWSL, WNBA, that now football is able to step up and we are getting our shot. And if everything goes well, you're gonna see me catching a big old touchdown in the end zone. I'm pumped about that. And in terms of flag football, I mean, if you look at where we are now, think about the WNBA in like 1999 when it was just starting. If everyone in this room had pulled some money together and invested in a team, we'd have our own island at this point, right? Because of the ROI. That's what's happening right now with flag football. It's granular at the moment with girls. We've got about 10 states that have officially made it in a high school sport. The NAIA has made it a collegiate sport, so now girls can go get paid to play flag football in college, right? This is huge. Now, we are about 4 years out from 2028, the Olympics, and it's going to skyrocket the number of girls that are playing. I've got plenty of girls following me on social media, and as you were saying, Bridget, like, it's the return that a brand can get on investing in girls playing flag football. Those girls are going to grow up to be young women who are going to get married, who are going to have that 90% purchasing power for their families. So if Ally's coming in, they're all going to have Ally accounts, right? If Tide comes in, guess what they're going to be using to clean the clothes of or make their husbands do it. Clean the clothes for their families because they're busy scoring touchdowns. But to me, it's an absolute no-brainer. If you look at the value of what NFL teams are worth now in the billions of dollars, most NFL owners now could not afford to purchase an NFL team right now because of the massive amount of value that has accumulated over the years. In the same way, anyone investing in flag football right now, you are getting in on the ground level. I can't speak about it enough because, we don't have all the time in the world, but it is the most magnificent investment possible.
I'm so excited for flag, I have to be honest.
Yeah, me too.
I can't wait.
It's going to be so
I'm
fun.
coming out of retirement.
Do it. We got a space for you.
So I want to talk about, there was a moment at the NBA All-Star, and hopefully you guys, well, first of all, I hope you haven't been asleep on watching Caitlin Clark, or there's been a lot of things happening in women's basketball, but there was a moment that I paid a lot of attention to, which is when Steph and Sabrina did the three-point shootout. And I want those who aren't in our community to understand how significant that was. For me, I looked at it as this isn't a coincidence. This is finally men and women growing up with sports and watching two elite athletes respect each other. And it didn't matter what the outcome was. But tell from a basketball perspective and just what it meant for your sport to see that and it ended up getting the highest rating at the NBA All-Star. So I'd love to hear your point of view on it as well, because it was a moment that I paid attention to, and I'm curious how you saw it.
Yeah, I mean, I saw it the same way. Again, it's like the people that we always have these conversations with about the value of women's sports, how elite we are, it's never our counterparts. It's always people who are out that have never played, that just want to find something to complain about. It's always been our counterparts that have, essentially had our backs and said something. Now, I think it's becoming more of a thing where they are like using their platforms a little bit more to leverage for us. Had Steph not been like, oh, let's have Sabrina at NBA All-Star, the NBA, they're not going to invite her to just come do it. But that's Steph leveraging his platform to make sure that she's seen in the same capacity that he's seen, because they're both elite shooters. And it just goes back to the thing of where they're like, oh, make sure she shoots from the W line. There's not like when you step on a soccer field, it's not like, oh, this is the women's and this is the men. It's like, no, it's a soccer field. It's a basketball court. It's 94 feet, and you shoot from where you shoot from. So for her to be on that stage and get the same score that Damian Lillard, who won the men's three-point contest, that's a huge deal, because now for those people that we always have those conversations with, now they can see it in like the same light. It's like, oh, wow, she got the same as Damian and shot from the same place. Look at that.
If you can shoot, you can shoot.
If you can
shoot, you can shoot.
If
Shoot
you
or
I
can
know,
play,
that
you
was
can
my
play.
favorite line that came out of it. If you can shoot. We like to say, welcome to the women's sports party, because it's like we've been in it for a little bit. It's
Yeah.
kind of our fun. But Bridget, I want to talk a little bit more about that leadership, because I don't care if your mom's out here, you know, you have sisters, you have aunts, you have brothers. We want everybody to understand the importance of girls playing sports, because it is no joke. They go and they lead. And it's really important now to pay attention to that, because you want your daughters, your sisters, your aunts, you want the sons to grow up with girls playing sports, because this is Gen X, my generation, is the first generation that has actually lived my whole generation with Title IX, which means it's a part of our entire ecosystem for me. And it's a really important one when you think about it from a brand perspective. I get more phone calls from CEOs of different business verticals wanting to hire a former female athlete. Doesn't matter what level, but I want you to spend a little bit more time talking about this, Bridget, as you think about, I think about your whole staff. And I know every one of your backgrounds.
Yes.
I don't think there's one person that didn't play sport.
Nope.
But I want you to understand the power of it and the importance of it from a leadership standpoint, and that next evolution for women and for girls to lead.
I feel like I am in a position of privilege. My position at Ally and my position in corporate America allows me to make impact. It just does. And the reason that I'm in this position is because I played sports. Like, I attribute the majority of my success in life to playing sports. I learned how to work with a team. I learned my role on a team. I learned respect. I learned discipline. I learned how to win and how to lose with grace. I learned how to motivate myself and how to motivate others. I mean, those are fundamental characteristics that you have to have as a leader, and that is what sports
Welcome, Christina Villa.
Hi. Hi.
Hi, Christine.
We still have time on the clock.
I'm watching all the time, I swear.
know.
I'm watching it.
Come on, stop
And like
sneezing.
30 more seconds back to that.
Right?
But that is what sports does. And I think because I have that privilege, not only have I been able to make an impact in the women's sports world, that impact was made because I had the ability to hire women's sports athletes that are smart as hell and know the landscape and know the potential of women's sports and understand the value and the trajectory and can advocate for it and can influence other people. And I think that is so important when you're thinking about women in a corporation. I mean, if women were not around the table, I don't know that the 50-50 commitment that we made would have been a thing. I mean, the reason it is happening is because we had women around the table. And I just got to tell you, like, if you are a brand and you are going to invest in women's sports, you should. And I think you've got to be very intentional. And I think you have to be very persistent. And I think you have to be absolutely 100% unapologetic.
Yes. All right, we're going to go a little over, because Ashlyn, one of my favorite things when you and I first met is I saw the advocacy work you did, and I was paying attention to you from afar. We had a moment at the US Open. We realized you're going to be perfect for the board.
Family?
Yes, we did.
Family at first sight.
But I want you to talk about the importance of advocacy and for women using their voices. I mean, obviously, as an advocacy organization, we know that we try to, scream from the mountaintops, but you do it for all girls, all women. And I'm very curious on why you think that's so important, and you live it every day. And it's kind of like the theme of this whole day that I saw is the power of women together. So talk a little bit more about your advocacy side of you.
Well, I just owe so much to the game. I owe so much to the sport. I owe so much for the opportunity it has given me, and I always want to give that same little 5-year-old who was so confused, who didn't really have a home and a place. Like, I want them to have that, because it did change my life and saved me so much. And the truth is I won at every level. I did. I won national championships. I won youth championships. I won NWSL titles. I won World Cups. I'm an Olympian. But I will honestly say my greatest memory and the greatest success to this date as a 38-year-old was fighting for equal pay. And I'll say this. When we were playing in 2019, we won the World Cup in France. And people were chanting, like in games, in the middle of a World Cup, equal pay. equal pay. We ended up winning, flying straight to New York to the ticker tape parade. Hundreds of thousands of people. I'm talking dads with little girls of signs, equal pay, like hundreds of thousands of people chanting. It took 6 years to get there, and we won that fight, and it was the hardest decision we ever made was to take our employers to court with no, I didn't know, we weren't making any money. We didn't have any money. So we actually, all of our ticket sales went to lawyers. And I'll never see the benefit of the equal pay lawsuit, but I know the opportunity that it gave this younger generation. They have one thing to worry about, and that is winning and being the best in the fucking world. Because truthfully, I had to work 3 jobs and be the best. Like, it was so hard that I had to work in the morning, I had to run camps, I had to focus on building a brand outside of sport because the money just wasn't there. I didn't make money playing. I actually lost money playing. And it's a really big factor of why I retired. I had another year on my contract. I started having children, and I was like, priorities look different for me. And we've had this real hard conversation. I stopped playing because I just lost too much money doing it. Wow. And now this younger generation, they don't have to worry about that. So for me, that is my greatest win, is fighting for equal pay. And hopefully now this younger generation can just focus on one thing, and that's being the best fucking player they possibly can. And nothing else matters because they're paid what they're actually worth.
Yeah.
And I will tell you soccer still needs more investment, but that's not the case for every single sport. Like, I know we're over, and I don't know if we have time to do a couple questions, but if you have your conversation that we've talked about, people don't realize in order for her to play football, she's had to pay to play football. Like, every sport has a different place of where they are on their journey, and we need people to understand the power of investing. And I don't care if you buy a jersey, if you buy a ticket to go to a game, become a season ticket holder, invest in your high school water polo, whatever that is, make an impact. Because when you do that, it helps the next generation behind us. So I think about the founder, my boss, Billie Jean. She did it for everybody else, not for herself.
Yep.
None of us would be sitting here if it wasn't for Billie Jean King.
Yep.
And that's what every generation has to do. And sports has always been this team that we've always seen it as a team, but we need the whole community of women, the whole business women of community, women of business, to understand that we're all in this together, because we will be unstoppable if you can really think about where this industry can go and how fast it can go for every sport. Yeah. So I'd love to open up the question.